I always thought I'd feel it coming. That sixth sense women supposedly have when their world is about to implode. But there I was, slicing heirloom tomatoes for his favorite pasta sauce, when my phone lit up with the message that would burn my life to the ground. From Nathan. Ella, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. Megan and I have been seeing each other for months. I've withdrawn some money to get settled. I'm sorry. My knife clattered against the marble countertop. Megan, my sister, my fucking sister. I stared at those words until they blurred, my sanctuary kitchen suddenly foreign territory. The pasta water boiled over, hissing as it hit the burner. Funny how the world keeps spinning when yours stops dead. I checked our joint account. $18,000 gone, just like that. The thing about betrayal is how it rewires your memories. All those late nights at the office. The mysterious hotel receipts. The way he'd take calls in another room. The slightly too long hugs between them at Christmas. Every suspicious moment I'd rationalized away now clicked into place like the tumblers of a lock. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I methodically turned off the stove, poured myself a glass of the Cabernet we'd been saving for our anniversary, and sat down to catalog exactly how thoroughly I'd been played. Game on, I whispered to my empty kitchen, my voice steady even as my hands trembled. Game fucking on. The first piece of evidence I found wasn't even hidden. The Lakewood Grand Hotel receipt, stuffed in his sock drawer like I was too stupid to look there. 3 nights, premium suite, champagne service, all while I thought he was at a financial planning conference in Denver. My methodical search yielded more treasures, a hidden folder of messages on his laptop, detailing not just their affair but the systematic way they'd been planning to leave me. Dating back 11 months. Planning sessions over brunch, apartment viewings, my sister asking if that antique roll-top desk in our guest room, the one I'd lovingly restored after finding it at an estate sale, could maybe come with them. I barely recognized the Nathan in those messages, cruel, dismissive, calculating. She'll fall apart for a while, but she'll be fine, he'd written. Ella's always been the strong one. Besides, she has the boutique to distract her. My boutique, the clothing store I'd built from nothing while supporting his career. The business that had finally started turning real profit this year. The dream he'd called your expensive hobby for the first 3 years. But the financial records were what truly told the story. Small withdrawals, investment accounts slowly drained. A pattern of financial extraction so careful I might never have noticed if he hadn't gotten greedy with that final $18,000 withdrawal. I sat cross-legged on our bedroom floor, spreadsheets and screenshots spread around me like a detonation pattern, and finally let the tears come. Not sad tears, rage tears. The kind that burn your cheeks and blur your vision but sharpen your resolve. I hadn't just been betrayed, I'd been targeted, systematically, by the 2 people who should have protected my heart most fiercely. That night, I made 2 calls. The first to Patricia Winters, the shark attorney who'd helped my friend Sophia through her nightmare divorce. The second to my mentor, Diana Ellis, the woman who'd backed my boutique when no bank would take a chance on me. I need a war counsel, I told Diana, my voice hollow even to my own ears. I'll be there in 30 minutes, she replied without hesitation. And Ella, bring everything, every receipt, every screenshot, every bank statement. We're not just going to survive this. We're going to bury them. Patricia's office smelled like expensive leather and victory. She listened without interruption as I laid out the whole sordid tale, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. Behind her rimless glasses, her eyes were calculating but kind. The good news, she said when I finished, is that he's made a critical error with that withdrawal. Judges don't look kindly on emptying accounts before filing for divorce. And he hasn't even filed yet, has he? I don't think so. The message just said he was leaving. Even better, we're going to freeze everything immediately. Joint accounts, investment portfolios, property assets. He clearly thought you'd fall apart. We're going to show him how wrong he was. Diana, elegant in her signature black turtleneck, had been silently reviewing the financial documents I'd brought. Now she looked up, her mouth set in a grim line. He's been planning this for at least 18 months, she said. These withdrawals started small but escalated. Classic embezzlement pattern, actually. 18 months, my voice sounded hollow. That's when I opened the second location. When you were too busy to notice, Patricia nodded. Standard playbook for cheaters. Wait for the partner to be distracted by a major project, then start the affair. Diana placed her hand over mine. This isn't your fault, Ella. You trusted the people who should have been trustworthy, but now we're going to protect what's yours. Patricia outlined the strategy. Immediate injunctions to freeze accounts, documentation of everything already taken, swift legal filings to establish spousal theft, and a forensic accountant to trace every missing penny. What about the affair? I asked. Doesn't that matter legally? Honestly, not as much as the financial misconduct. Colorado's a no-fault state. But this, she tapped the bank statements, this is theft, plain and simple, and we can use it. By the time I left Patricia's office, my bank accounts were protected, a forensic accountant was engaged, and preliminary papers were being prepared. Diana drove me home, insisting I not be alone that first night. Turn off your phone, she advised. He's going to realize what's happening when his cards stop working. Let him sweat it out with your sister. You need rest. I did as she suggested, but rest didn't come. Instead, I found myself in our home office at 3 a.m., creating the most extensive documentation system of my life. Every message, every receipt, every memory of suspicious behavior, all cataloged by date, organized into folders, backed up to secure cloud storage. This wasn't just about divorce. This was about survival, about justice, about making sure that when the dust settled, I would still be standing, and they would understand exactly what they'd done. I hadn't planned to confront him so soon. Patricia had advised against it. Element of surprise, she'd said. Let the legal papers be his first clue that you're not rolling over. But then I saw them, together, casually browsing the farmer's market at Westside Plaza like they hadn't dynamited someone's life 3 days earlier. His hand rested casually on the small of my sister's back, a gesture he'd used with me countless times. She was wearing a sundress I'd given her for her birthday. Something in me snapped. I approached them with a calm I didn't feel, cutting through the Saturday morning crowd like an arrow to its target. Nathan saw me first, his eyes widening in that deer-in-headlights way that might have been comical under different circumstances. Ella, he managed, his voice catching. We should talk, but not here. Why not here? My voice carried, turning a few heads. You had no problem taking $18,000 from our accounts. You had no problem fucking my sister for nearly a year. Why have a problem talking in public now? Megan paled, her freckles standing out against suddenly bloodless skin. Ella, please. Please what, Megan? Please keep quiet about how you helped your brother-in-law steal from me while you were sleeping with him. Please pretend I don't know about your brunch planning sessions where you divided up my life like vultures picking at a carcass. People were definitely starring now. Several had phones out. I didn't care. Nathan stepped toward me, lowering his voice to that patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. You're making a scene. This isn't like you. You have no idea what I'm like anymore. I smiled then, a cold, hard smile that felt foreign on my face. But you're about to find out. Check your accounts lately, Nathan. Notice anything. Frozen. The flash of panic in his eyes was worth whatever points I might have lost with Patricia for this unplanned confrontation. What did you do? He hissed. Protected what's mine. Something I should have done the first time you came home smelling like my sister's perfume. A woman nearby audibly gasped. You can't just freeze our accounts, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Watch me. Oh, and the forensic accountant says hi. Every penny you took, we're tracking it. All those little withdrawals you thought I wouldn't notice, cataloged. The $18,000, just the cherry on top of your felony Sunday. Megan grabbed his arm. Nathan, let's go. But I wasn't finished. I stepped closer, close enough to see the stubble he'd missed on his jaw, close enough to smell the cologne I'd bought him for Christmas. You thought I'd crumble, that I'd be so devastated by losing you that I wouldn't fight back. That's the thing about betrayal, Nathan. It doesn't just break hearts, it creates warriors. I turned to walk away, then paused, glancing back at my sister. By the way, Megan, that desk you wanted, I'm donating it to the women's shelter. Seems fitting somehow. As I walked away, head high, I heard the unmistakable sounds of an argument beginning behind me. The first cracks in their united front, and despite everything, I smiled. I hadn't expected to find Project Exodus. Nathan had always been arrogant enough to use our shared cloud storage for everything, apparently never considering I might check it. 3 weeks after that market confrontation, while gathering documentation for Patricia, I stumbled upon a folder I'd never seen before. Inside was the playbook for my destruction, detailed notes on my vulnerabilities, financial projections for how to extract maximum assets, a timeline for their relationships, public launch, designed to minimize backlash, lists of mutual friends they expected to keep, categorized by loyalty likelihood. Most chilling was a document titled Contingencies that outlined responses for various ways I might react. Scenario 1, Ella breaks down completely. Scenario 2, Ella makes public drama. Scenario 3, Ella seeks revenge. For Scenario 3, Nathan had written, "Unlikely. Ella avoids conflict and has always prioritized appearances. However, if she does seek legal action, we emphasize her workaholic tendencies, emotional distance, and past therapy for anxiety to suggest instability." He'd planned to use my anxiety against me. The anxiety I'd developed after my father's death. The anxiety I'd trusted him enough to seek help for. I printed everything, 3 copies, one for my records, one for Patricia, and one that I sealed in a waterproof document case and stored at Diana's house. Then I got to work. Nathan had underestimated me in a fundamental way. Yes, I valued privacy. Yes, I worked hard. But he'd mistaken my self-control for weakness, my dignity for docility. He'd forgotten that I'd built a business from nothing, that I'd survived my father's death and my mother's subsequent spiral, that I'd put myself through college while working 2 jobs. He'd forgotten, or perhaps never truly known, exactly who he was dealing with. With Patricia's guidance, I moved systematically. First, financial protection. Accounts not just frozen but thoroughly audited. Assets inventoried down to the last serving spoon. The forensic accountant Patricia hired found an additional $42,000 Nathan had siphoned over 18 months, money that would now need to be repaid with interest. Next, evidence compilation. Those damning messages, the Project Exodus documents, statements from the Lakewood Grand Hotel staff who'd become familiar with my husband and sister as repeat guests. I even recovered deleted texts from a phone backup Nathan hadn't known existed. Then the strategic release of information, not a social media blast that would have validated his emotional and unstable narrative, but careful, factual disclosures to key figures in our community. His boss, our financial advisor, the head of the charity board we'd served on together. "I wanted you to be aware of some concerning developments," I'd say calmly, before presenting selected evidence. "I'm handling this privately, but felt you should know, given your relationship with Nathan." Patricia called it controlled demolition of his reputation. The community response surprised even me. People I'd thought would side with Nathan, particularly his old college friends, reached out to express support. My boutique saw an uptick in business, with customers specifically mentioning they wanted to help. Nathan's colleague James sent documentation showing Nathan had tried to expense some of those hotel stays as client meetings. Meanwhile, Nathan and Megan were floundering. The frozen accounts had hit them hard. Their carefully planned exit strategy had presumed access to our joint resources while I licked my wounds. Without that financial cushion, they'd been forced to move into a dingy apartment complex known primarily for its paper-thin walls and persistent mold issues. Nathan attempted damage control, sending a mass email to our social circle claiming I'd had a breakdown and was lashing out with false accusations. It backfired spectacularly when recipients, already briefed with actual evidence, responded by cutting contact with him. Megan tried reaching out to me directly, leaving a tearful voicemail about fixing our family that revealed more desperation than remorse. I forwarded it to Patricia without listening to it twice. Social media exploded with barely disguised references to our situation. Nathan's company quietly removed his profile from their leadership team webpage. The charity board sent a formal letter accepting his resignation. The walls were closing in. The unraveling came faster than anyone anticipated. Nathan, desperate and cornered, made a last-ditch attempt to salvage his reputation by calling an impromptu gathering at Hillcrest Community Center. Ironically, the venue where we'd held our engagement party 6 years earlier. Diana's son worked at the center and tipped us off. "He's invited practically everyone you know," she told me. "He's saying it's to clear the air about Ella's accusations." Patricia was adamant I shouldn't attend. "Let him dig his own grave. We've got him legally. The social fallout isn't worth your presence." But I knew better. This was my moment. The confrontation that would end not just our marriage, but the power he thought he still held over me. "I'll be there," I told Diana, "and I'll bring receipts, literally." I arrived 20 minutes after the scheduled start time, dressed in a white suit I designed for my boutique's professional collection. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup, no wedding ring. I carried a slim leather portfolio containing selected highlights from my evidence collection. The community center's main hall fell silent as I entered. About 40 people had shown up, a smaller crowd than Nathan had likely hoped for, but substantial nonetheless. He stood at the front beside a hastily arranged podium, midway through what appeared to be an impassioned speech. Megan sat in the front row, her expression shifting from supportive to horrified as she spotted me. Nathan faltered, "Ella, this is a private gathering." Oddly enough, so was our marriage, but that didn't stop you from inviting my sister into it. My voice carried effortlessly through the room. Years of business presentations had taught me how to project without shouting. I walked calmly to the center of the room. "Please, continue. I'm curious to hear how you're explaining our situation." He glanced around nervously. "I was just explaining how concerned I am about your well-being and how these accusations are fully documented," I finished for him, "with timestamps, receipts, and witness statements." I opened my portfolio. "Would you like me to share those now, or would you prefer to continue your version first?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Nathan's face flushed. "You're twisting everything," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Let's check." I turned to address the room. "Nathan called this meeting to clear the air, so let's do exactly that. Facts only. On March 15th, Nathan withdrew $18,000 from our joint accounts before texting me that he was leaving me for my sister, with whom he'd been having an affair for nearly a year." I produced the bank statement and held it up. "Fact." 18 months, Megan suddenly said, her voice small. The room went still. Nathan whipped his head toward her. "Megan, don't." "It wasn't a year, it was 18 months. She looked directly at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." And just like that, the careful narrative Nathan had constructed collapsed. He tried to regain control, accusing me of manipulation, of always being cold and distant, of driving him to find comfort elsewhere. But with each desperate claim, his credibility shrank. I remained calm, presenting evidence point by point. The financial extraction, the Project Exodus documents, the plan to use my anxiety against me. People began to leave, not storming out, but quietly slipping away with averted eyes and murmured excuses. Each departure was a vote, and Nathan was losing by a landslide. Finally, when only a handful of stunned observers remained, Nathan snapped. "You think you've won?" he shouted, abandoning all pretense of composure. "You're nothing without me. Who do you think backed your little boutique dream? Who gave you credibility in this town?" I smiled then, a real smile. "I did. I built my business while you were planning my downfall. I created a life you thought you could destroy, but couldn't, and now everyone knows exactly who you are." I closed my portfolio. Our court date is next Thursday. Patricia will be serving your final papers tomorrow. The forensic accountant found the remaining accounts where you hid assets, by the way. The judge has been notified. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Nathan, I'm keeping the house. You might want to start looking for a better apartment. I hear the mold situation in your current place is problematic. I walked out with my head high, not looking back to see what remained of the man I'd once built my life around. 6 months later, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen. The marble countertops were gone, replaced with warm butcher block. The sterile white cabinets had given way to a rich navy blue. Every trace of the life Nathan and I had shared had been methodically erased. The legal battle had been swift and decisive. Patricia had been right. Judges didn't look kindly on spouses who drained accounts and hid assets. Nathan had been ordered to repay everything he'd taken, plus legal fees. The house, the majority of our investments, and full ownership of my boutique had been awarded to me. Nathan and Megan had moved to Arizona, from what I'd heard. His career in financial planning had imploded when word of his embezzlement from our joint accounts spread through professional circles. My sister had reached out once more, a handwritten letter that I'd burned without reading. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. My boutique had not just survived, but thrived in the aftermath. I'd rebranded it Phoenix Rising, perhaps a bit on the nose, but the symbolism resonated with my customers. We'd expanded to a third location, and I'd launched a small clothing line specifically designed for women starting over after major life upheavals. Once a month, I led a support group at the women's shelter where I donated Nathan's coveted antique desk. Rebuilding after betrayal, we called it. I shared my story openly, emphasizing not the pain but the power I'd reclaimed. The wall of my home office, once covered in wedding photos, now displayed framed milestones. The legal decree returning my stolen funds, the key to my third boutique location, news clippings about my clothing line, thank you cards from women I'd helped. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana, still on for dinner, bringing that commercial real estate agent to discuss the fourth location. I smiled and confirmed, then opened the voice memo app on my phone. I'd started recording messages to myself during the darkest days of the divorce, little pep talks and observations that had helped me maintain perspective. Now I kept the practice as a way to trace my ongoing evolution. 6 months post-Nathan, I spoke clearly into the phone. And today I realized something important. This revenge wasn't just about making them pay. It was about proving to myself that I couldn't be destroyed, that I was never as vulnerable as they thought. That betrayal doesn't define you, how you respond to it does. I paused, looking around at the kitchen that was now truly mine. To anyone listening to these someday, they can take your trust, your history, even your family, but they can never take your power unless you surrender it, and I never will again. I ended the recording and slipped my phone into my pocket. Outside, the sun was setting, painting my garden in shades of gold and possibility. I had dinner plans to keep, a business to expand, and a life that was finally, completely my own. Turns out, living well isn't just the best revenge. It's the only one worth having.